Hey everyone, the All Hazards Prepper here. Hope everyone is staying safe and staying warm out there. Exciting news. I wanted to get on a little bit before we start the show today and talk about some exciting news I've been working on for almost 6 months now, and that is developing a household emergency operations plan to ensure that your family and anyone in your household is prepared for the next disaster or emergency. This plan is very robust. I am if the plan is completed right now. I'm just working on the website that it's going to be for sale on, and some other items on there as well. I hope to have this launched within the coming weeks. Definitely by the end of February, it'll be launched. But if you're interested in receiving the household emergency operations plan before anyone else gets it, I want to do like a pre-sale, and this plan will just be $20, and it'll be somewhere you can purchase it online. I have a website developed. It'll be a very simple process. You'll download it. It's a PDF fillable. And be able to fill it out, and definitely will be super easy to fill out if you're just a beginning prepper, if you've been prepping for a while. But if you're interested in receiving the link to this website before anyone else and getting your hands on the household emergency operations plan, reach out to me, please. You can direct message me on Facebook, Instagram, X, or you can send us an email at theallhazardsprepper@gmail.com. Again, theallhazardsprepper@gmail.com, and I will put you on the pre-sale list, and that way you can get access to the website before it goes live to the rest of our group here. Hope everyone enjoys today's episode with Mark with the Off-Grid Medic. I sure did. And continue to stay aware, stay prepared, and stay alive out there. Enjoy today's episode.
Welcome back to the All Hazards Prepper Show, your go-to spot for all your disaster prep information and how to survive wild SHTF scenarios. Plus, we'll chat about the chaos of the world, throw in weather updates, and cover any topics the All Hazards Prepper has in his head this week. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform and join us on social media. Now, let's welcome your fearless leader and the brains behind the All Hazards Prepper, Blake.
Welcome back to the All Hazards Prepper Show. This is your host, Blake. Hope everyone is staying safe out there. Super excited for the guest I have on today. We have Mark DeJong on. We're today going to be talking about off-grid prepping, first aid, trauma care, all the things in between. Mark is the founder and CEO of the Off-Grid Medic. Mark is a nationally registered paramedic and founder of the Off-Grid Medic LLC, with over 30 years of experience in treating victims of trauma and sudden illnesses. He is based out of South Carolina. Mark has a degree in emergency medical services and holds an advanced wilderness EMT certification. As part of a military assignment, he has spent 2 years providing remote medical care to indigenous people of the Philippines, where he has a passion for medicine and primitive living fused together. He serves on the advisory council at the Appalachian Center for Wilderness Medicine and is trained alongside elite members of the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marshal Service. Mark has served in several roles, including field training officer, director of emergency medical services for local government and faculty at a technical college system in Georgia. Alongside, he also has been a deputy director of emergency management. He considers himself a lifelong learner and is very well known in this field. Mark has appeared on the Weather Channel, where he is featured on Uncharted Adventure. And today we're just going to really dive into a discussion on being a prepper and also, making sure that we have, first aid skills and knowledge, and also know a little bit more about the resources. So, Mark, so glad to have you on today. Kind of, just tell us a little bit about the Off-Grid Medic, how you got started, and where you guys are today.
Yeah. So, Blake, number one, obviously it's an absolute honor and a privilege to be on the show. I want to thank you for coordinating with me so that we can get this information out to everyone. The whole idea behind wilderness medicine or off-grid medicine it kind of grew out of this void that was there in regular, quote unquote, regular medical training. There were several different classes and programs out there for street side medicine, but very, very little material out there. Very, very, very limited offerings for anyone who what's the first thing that you're supposed to do in your response to an incident? You're supposed to pick up your phone and you're supposed to dial 911, right? Well, no one ever talked about, well, what happens if you can't do that? And so what I did was I founded Off Grid Medic to basically bridge that gap, to provide people with the skills, the training, the knowledge, the education, to actually be able to stretch out that golden hour, or that first hour from the time that incident occurs until the patient actually gets to definitive care.
Perfect. Yes, that is definitely something I've seen that has lacking, I guess. And there's a lot of different people out there that live in areas that are off grid, or maybe have hobby of going backpacking or something, and then they go out and they don't have the resources or the knowledge to take care of themselves if something hasn't happened. But if something has happened and they're stuck, and now they have to wait for first responders to come, if they even come, depending on where you're at, and definitely have to be prepared. So talking about disasters, since that's what we kind of focus here on the All Hazards Prepper, and then we'll kind of get into being off grid, maybe a little bit more wilderness first aid. But what are some of the common injuries that you've seen after a disaster occur, or even during a disaster? Especially working in local government as an EMS director. What are some of the common injuries that you've seen before during disasters?
Well, let's take our latest disaster here that unfortunately both you and I kind of got caught up in the middle of, and that was Hurricane Helene. During the actual time that the disaster is occurring, the majority of the situations that you're going to run into are going to be traumatic injuries. They're going to be people who are having vehicle accidents. They're going to be people who are stuck underneath debris. They're going to be people that are getting hit by debris. They're going to be exposed to the elements. But keep in mind that we have that traumatic side, but we also have the medical side as well. So now all of a sudden, in the aftermath of this, we have people who have medications that they need to take every day, and all of a sudden all of that's gone. It was washed away, it was blown away, whatever. So now we have those medical conditions to deal with, in addition to those traumatic conditions to deal with.
Yes, that's definitely a great point. After disasters, I've worked in emergency services now for almost 13 years, and those traumatic injuries that you see during disasters is definitely a lot. And a lot of people don't take account of the things after. They're using the chainsaw and don't know how to use the chainsaw, and the next thing they cut their leg, or have a heart attack or a stroke or something of that nature, a cardiac event, because they were outside working, and that put stress on their body, and next thing you know, they're in the hospital, and they're a statistic, unfortunately. After disaster. So that's definitely been a talk in the emergency management field, as well as how you, those directly indicated, deaths or injuries during a disaster. And then you have those, indirect type things that, wasn't necessarily due to the disaster, but happened during the disaster. And if it wasn't for the disaster, might have not occurred or might have occurred. And it's kind of hard to statistically keep track of. Mark, for someone that has no clue about what we're talking about here, what do you really define as a traumatic injury? What is, to you as a medically, EMT paramedic, what is a traumatic injury per se?
What we're talking about here are musculoskeletal injuries, soft tissue injuries, head injuries, neck and spine injuries. It is something that has a traumatic cause to it. You can contrast that with, let's say, asthma. All right. Asthma has a completely different mechanism by which it attacks the body. So things like asthma, stroke, cardiac events, allergic reactions, illnesses of those natures kind of fall into a completely separate category than let's focus on stopping the bleed. Let's focus on immobilizing the patient. Let's focus on getting our primary and our secondary survey done, monitoring our vitals and everything else.
Yes, it's definitely a lot of people that listen to this show might not necessarily have a medical background, and that's definitely great to point out there what a traumatic injury is versus just an illness or something like that. So you mentioned a little bit of training in there, but what are some ways our listeners can really train for doing first aid during or after disasters? You talked about Stop the Bleed. That's a big program out here in the U.S. now. What are some good ways that the average citizen, maybe not wanting to go take wilderness EMT or wilderness first aid, could go out and really learn some basic skills to help them during a disaster?
Well, just like whenever you deal with a patient, everything really starts with an assessment. So, what I would encourage all of your listeners to do is to perform a personal assessment on what your level of comfort is, what your level of training is, and how you're going to use the equipment and supplies that you have that are available. And what I like to do is I kind of like to play devil's advocate. Okay. I will write down every possible injury and illness that I can think of. And I can be like, oh, okay, I'm going to go down this list. Do I have what I need, or can I source what I need to be able to treat this? Okay, done. Next one, done. And literally think your way through your medical kit. And because of my level of training, because of your level of training, I actually prefer to use the term medical kit over first aid kit, simply because we are so far beyond first aid. It just doesn't apply anymore. But think your way through situations. And as people in the preparedness community should already be doing, think your way through every possible scenario and every possible condition, and figure out, okay, what is my plan? What are my resources? What am I going to do if fill in the blank happens?
Exactly.
And then you start to make your preparedness plans, which actually directly transitions over into the response phase. So if a response is needed, then you dig back into your brain or into your notebook or into your medical kit or your whatever, and you already have everything that you need to be prepared for that response phase.
Exactly. Yes, definitely have to assess what you're comfortable with. That's definitely a good point there. Not everyone is going to be comfortable with doing something that dealing especially with a traumatic injury. Maybe
Right.
they're not comfortable putting on a tourniquet or doing Stop the Bleed or something like that. I would say if you're a prepper, I would find ways to become comfortable with it. Go to the training. Do if you go to Stop the Bleed training, or first aid training, a lot of communities nowadays offer it. Just go on your county's emergency management or emergency medical services, or even your local fire department. I've seen those. They put on first aid training, Stop the Bleed training, and definitely CPR type training. Even if it's just a heart saver, basic, hour, 2 hour, long CPR course. A lot of this stuff is quite frankly very simple to do that really could save someone's life. For really during a disaster, you could really not have to, you wouldn't have to depend so much on that EMT or that fire truck being there so fast, because during a disaster, as we all know and we've talked about before, then that's going to be there's going to be a significant delay in that. So if you can go ahead and start doing some of these things, certainly like Mark said, being able to assess the patient, really know what's kind of going on, that's definitely helpful. Mark, you did mention there, talking about some written material that may be good for preppers to have. What are some books or guides, or I don't like I like telling people not to go on Google, and because I don't want people going on Google unfortunately during a disaster, because it's probably not going to be available. But what's some
Exactly.
books or guides out there that someone could have on hand in their prep kit, or maybe first aid kit? What's some good books and guides out there?
Yeah, so my personal go-to is a book that's written by Dr. Iserson, and that's Iserson. I believe he is professor emeritus at the I believe it's either the New Mexico School of Medicine or the Arizona School of Medicine. It's one of the two. But he actually wrote a book called Improvised Medicine, and it is without a doubt the most thorough document that I have ever read in my life. And he actually gets down into how to make improvised suction devices. He has charts in there that will show what is the autoclave time to be able to reuse this gear, what gear can be reused, and what gear is truly single use. Absolute wealth of information there. You know, going towards the simpler side, a good, believe it or not, even a copy of the Boy Scout manual is going to help you out. It's obviously not going to be as in depth. It's not going to be as technical, because everything in Dr. Eichers's book is pretty doggone technical, but it's spot on as far as its accuracy. But anything that we have a saying in the quote unquote survival community that knowledge weighs nothing. And the time to learn what to do about a particular situation, or the time to learn how to treat a specific injury, is not after that injury has occurred. And that's why we stress training so much. If you train frequent enough, just like with a firearm, if you train at the range often enough, you actually get to the point where you don't even think about your draw, your sight picture, and your squeeze, right? It literally becomes second nature. And medical skills can be treated exactly the same way, and you can develop that same level of proficiency on the medical side, because usually on the medical side, whenever something goes wrong, it happens very sudden. It's rarely quiet. There's usually a lot of yelling and, panic, and, everything basically goes from calm to chaos at, the drop of a pin. But then your job as the provider is to turn that chaos back into order. And the last thing that you want to be doing is, okay, was that in chapter 6 or was that in chapter 26? I can't remember, So it's about learning this stuff now and practicing this stuff now, so that you're not wasting those precious seconds, because seconds do matter. Seconds turn into minutes very, very quickly.
Yes, great points there. And during these types of situations, like Mark said, seconds are really it. There is a lot of different materials out there nowadays that we can we could write books on the books of what you could go out there and buy. But definitely having even if it's just going on Google now and watching YouTube videos on different things, or going and printing off, printed materials. I've been building something I've been working on as a prepper, is a Prepper's Library. I actually did a post on that Sunday, and actually a lot of the books that I found were medical books. So even going to the thrift store, Goodwill, I was able to find several books related to medicine and medical procedures. Also, Mark said a great book, something I've seen before, definitely a great book out there. But there's another book called the Prepper's Medical Handbook.
Yes.
And it's very good as well. I actually have that. I've read through it a little bit, and definitely helpful. But having some, and we've talked about this before here on the show and on the platform, is having some printed material is definitely helpful.
Yes.
Because do not depend on Google or YouTube during a disaster. It's probably not going to be available. Yeah.
Very, very true.
So kind of moving into more of the resources of first aid and medicine, what are some good things to have as we're building a first aid kit? To really, as a prepper's first aid kit, what are some good things, Mark, to have that you've seen in the field come useful, or maybe it's something that everyone has in their first aid kit that you've never used, and maybe it's not useful?
Yeah, and I'm really, really glad that we're covering this. This is what I refer to as your medical kit mentality, and I've got a fantastic video that's out there. It's a little bit long. It's about 30 minutes, but I actually go through and I explain why I carry what I carry. So for years, people have asked me, Mark, what's in your medical kit? And I just kind of chuckle, because I'm like, well, it kind of depends on what I'm doing. If I'm working as a paramedic, My medical kit is $250,000 worth of gear and equipment and supplies in a big metal box with blinky lights on it going down the road making noise, right? If I'm working as a contract medic, everything fits into a StatPax G3 bag. If I'm, on an ultralight trip, or if I'm just going for, a multi-day hike in the woods, whatever, then everything fits into a Ziploc bag. And I really got to looking at this, and I broke it down and really compared, the contents of an ambulance versus my contractor bag versus my pocket kit. And there were two things that really jumped out at me. Number one is the mission defines the equipment. Why do we have to carry $250,000 worth of stuff on the ambulance? Well, because you may work a gunshot at 8 a.m. You may deliver a baby at 10 a.m. You may shut down the interstate and guide in a helicopter at noon. You may work a stroke. You may work an overdose, and the cycle repeats. So you literally, the expectation is that you have to be completely self-sufficient and also have everything that meets your patient's needs until you can get them to definitive care. If you look at something like tactical medicine is very gear driven. You're going to see a lot of tourniquets. You're going to see a lot of chest seals. And why is that? Well, because in a tactical environment, what type of injuries would you expect? Right. And then if you take that and then if you compare that to, let's say, the wilderness side, well, you need to be able to treat the same things. But what all three, and I'm kind of going around the block to get here, but just kind of follow along with me. If you look at the common thread between what's in your medical kit versus what's in a contractor bag versus what's in an ambulance, it's not what you carry, it's what you can treat. And you always want to start with your immediate threats to life. So in emergency medicine, we use a lot of acronyms because it's really, really easy to get off track and you just don't know what to do next sometimes. So we use a lot of abbreviations and acronyms. For wilderness medicine, we use ABCDE. And that stands for airway, breathing, circulation, disability/deformity, and the environment. And I would challenge anyone to come up with a cause of death that does not include one of those 5 items. And I've done a lot of thinking on this, and I cannot come up with one. People are going to die because they're going to lose their airway. They're not breathing. They're going to either bleed out or bleed in. Either way, they're going to lose their ability to get from point A to point B so that they can self-rescue or so that they can call for help, or they're going to succumb to environmental issues. So it really doesn't matter what you carry. It's what you can treat. And as long as you can treat issues with airway, breathing, circulation, disability/deformity in the environment, then that puts you so far ahead of the game. That puts you so far, you are now giving your patient a fighting chance,
Definitely. Great points there.
A lot of commercial kits, they are sold by the number of pieces. And in 30 plus years of emergency medicine, I have never, not once, used a safety pin. But every medical kit that I see that is a commercial store-bought kit, every kit that I see has 10 different size safety pins in them. And I've had people say, Mark, but in a survival situation, you can use them to catch fish. Well, I'm going to call BS on that because I've actually tried it, and it doesn't work. The fish will straighten it out every single time, right? So there's a tremendous amount of commercialism that's out there, and you really don't need as much as you think, as long as you know how to use what you have, and if what you're carrying has multiple uses, then now you're really starting to think your way through those medical issues and think your way through your preps.
Yeah, great points there. You really have to assess And that's one thing I've had to do. And, I have different first aid kits for different things,
Sure.
just like you were talking about having different, an ambulance versus a tactical, medical bag is completely different.
Right.
It's really, based on what you're running into. And I kind of had that epiphany, I guess. And I had been carrying around a large, medical tactical bag with a gazillion stuff in it. And then I kind of looked at myself and I went, well, over the last 4 or 5 years, I've used it quite a bit. It's amazing how many family members or friends, or you're out in the public and don't have a first aid kit. And I looked at what I was using, what's my potential risk, and I really sized it down.
Mhm.
And made it a little bit easier to carry and easier to go through, and really make it just simpler. Versus now I do have a larger kit that I'm keeping at home, more of into disaster type of kit,
Right.
more of
Right.
stockpiling, I guess, if you will.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it is about, what are you preparing for? What is your best case, worst case, as far as, when am I going to be able to get to a higher level of care? When is a higher level of care reasonably anticipated to reach me? And
Certainly.
then you kind of build around that time frame. And unfortunately, you have to force yourself to think worst case scenario, just so that you can make sure that all your bases are covered and that you are truly prepared whenever it comes to a supply side.
Yeah, definitely good point. Yeah, and a lot of it too is look at where you're living. If you are in a city and there's multiple Trauma One centers around you, and all this stuff, look at that versus you're in a very remote state. Maybe you're in the Midwest or out in the Rockies somewhere, and the medical situation is not the same, and the nearest Trauma One or even Trauma Three hospital is miles or hours away, then it's a little bit different case there. And I probably just said something that most people have no clue about. Mark, could you talk real quick about what a Trauma One hospital is versus Trauma Three? Because
Yeah, yeah.
I've had people reach out, and I work in healthcare emergency management.
Mhm.
I've had people come up to me like, "What is the difference?" And maybe
Right.
you do a good job explaining that.
Yeah. So, if we take this from lowest level of care to highest level of care, okay, you're going to have your local doctor's office. That's going to be your lowest level of care. Above that, you're going to have an urgent care, because there's a pretty good chance that they may have an X-ray machine on site. Okay. Then you're going to move up to the community hospital level. That's going to be your little town hospital that treats simple fractures. They may not have a maternity ward, but it is a place where you can take someone and hopefully get them stabilized so that they can be transferred to a higher level of care. And then, it goes from that community hospital level to a level 3, to a level 2, and then finally up to a level 1. And CMS, which is the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, they are kind of like the ones that actually decide who is who in that food chain. But a level 1 facility, they have access to a cardiac cath lab. They have MRIs, they have CTs, they have a helicopter landing pad. Uh, they have all of the imaging. They have all of the staff there for reperfusion. They have a stroke center that's there. It is literally, it's the highest level of emergency medical care that you can have access to. Ironically enough, not all level 1 trauma facilities have pit viper antivenom. That is actually something that you need to figure out. If you are in an environment that has a lot of pit vipers in it, you need to start making some phone calls, making some real discreet inquiries to figure out which hospitals have it and which ones don't, because it's like $7,000 a vial,
Yeah.
and it's, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah,
But
Yeah, that's great. Great point there, Mark. Because as a prepper, that's something you need to kind of identify, and we've talked about emergency planning before. Planning for a household, it definitely is good to identify the medical resources within your community, from your
Absolutely.
local provider
Absolutely.
that's one to go see to a level one trauma center. Level one trauma centers here in the state of North Carolina. There's quite a few. But if you're, somewhere more, remote, say like a Wyoming or
Hmm.
Colorado or something like that. I think when I was living out in Wyoming, there's only one. I think it was just one level trauma center for the whole state, and
Right.
it's a
Right.
little bit different. And then two, knowing where your burn centers are. If you have a burn that's severe enough, trauma level one hospitals, they may not be even able to treat your burn based on
Correct.
what it is. You may have to go to
Correct.
a burn center. Here in our state of North Carolina, there's only one for the whole state,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
depends on where it is.
Yeah, the regional one here in the South Carolina, Georgia area is, you've got Grady in Atlanta, and then you've got the Augusta Burn Center over in Georgia.
Yeah,
So,
it's definitely good to identify these facilities, because if I mean, two, if you call the ambulance and ambulance can't come because of it's a major disaster, well, you need to know these centers that you could go and drive to, possibly, possibly if you're able to get there, depending on disaster we're dealing with. So definitely great conversation there. And talking more about resources, Mark, what are some medicines, whether it's medicine or an ointment, a cream? What is something that everyone should have on hand or have in their first aid kit? I get this question a lot. There's a million different medications out there, medicines out there that are over the counter, especially ointments and creams. What are some basic things that people need to have in their first aid kit as a prepper?
right. That's that's actually a fantastic question. And it's something that's quite often overlooked. The number one thing to focus on is what are your daily prescribed medications. Number one, if you are prescribed nitroglycerin that you just carry in your pocket because you suffer from angina, get your hands on as much of that as you can, because it does go bad if it gets wet, if the bottle cracks, if it gets exposed to direct sunlight, it loses its potency. But things like, so think about your emergency meds first, okay? Think about like nitroglycerin, think about albuterol, think about these are the emergency medicines that are actually going to keep you alive, number one. So number one, let's focus on staying alive, and then after that, we can focus on quality of life. Okay. So kind of moving down the list from there. In wilderness medicine, believe it or not, the painkiller of choice is actually acetaminophen, because it has very, very little side effects. The Appalachian Center for Wilderness Medicine encourages everyone to actually stay away from NSAIDs, and that's your nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, because those carry an increased risk of blood clots with them. And if you're already in a compromised state because of your injury or your illness, the last thing that you want to do is you want to increase the chance of blood clots, right? So no Advil, no ibuprofen, no Motrin, anything like that. So something for pain. I am a huge proponent of non-pharmaceutical pain relief methods. I will use cold packs, hot packs, elevation. I will use body positioning. I will use immobilization skills, whatever it takes before I'll actually give someone something for pain. But you need to think about that pain relief because it's going to be there. Another great one to have on hand is diphenhydramine, also known as Benadryl. One of the side effects of Benadryl is it can make you drowsy. And because it is so overused in our society, we're actually starting to see a lot more allergic reactions to diphenhydramine. So kind of keep that in mind as well. Some sort of an anti-diarrheal drug, and I'm not talking about, okay, I have an upset stomach and I've had it for 12 hours. I'm talking about something that's actually gotten to the point where you are getting truly physically dehydrated because your body is not absorbing moisture. That's when it becomes a life threat. As far as like creams, ointments, things like that, I'm definitely big on taking care of my feet. And my feet probably, it's actually a wonder that I haven't grown web toes yet because I'm in the water so much. But as a result of that, a good antifungal is definitely something to have. You can pick up a drug called clotrimazole right off the shelf. If you buy it off brand, it's significantly cheaper than if you go with the name brand stuff. And a lot of this is a lot of this kind of falls on the educational side too, right? I don't want to have to go out and spend a whole bunch of money for a bunch of medication. So if I go to any of my big box stores, if I go to any of my pharmacy stores, and I walk in and I pick up, let's say, a box of Benadryl, all right, the standard dose for Benadryl is 25 to 50 milligrams for an adult. All Benadryl tablets come in 25 milligrams. That's the way it's sold, is in 25 milligram tablets. So I can look at a pack of Benadryl, and it'll be $8 for 8 tablets. I can look right next to that, and I can see the store brand, and it's going to be $4 for 8 tablets. Or I can go to a place like the Dollar Tree and I can pick up 100 generic 25 milligram diphenhydramine tablets for $1.25. And as tight as money is all the way around these days, everyone has to watch their spending. And I am a huge proponent of spending money on the right things. I'm getting more of that medication for a significantly less dollar amount, and then that frees up that money that I can now spend for something else. So, but no, those are really the big ones. You take care of your feet, because anything that affects your ability to get from point A to point B automatically becomes a potential life threat. So take care of your feet. That's where the antifungal comes into play. Take care of all of your emergency needs. That means, if you know that a storm is coming and the storm is two days out, call up your doctor's office. Say, hey, is there any chance that you can call me in my refill a week early, because I darn sure don't want to run out of it.
Yep. Yeah, and I always tell people too, making sure if you can of your prescription drugs, get the 90-day supply.
Absolutely.
If you can get it, I would do it. It saves you trouble in the long run anyway. And in the if there is a disaster that occurs, at least you have that 90-day supply up until the 90 days. So great points there, Mark. And definitely a fan of the Dollar Tree. I've talked about that before. And a lot of these items too, they go bad over time, and you don't want to spend a whole lot of money on it just to throw it out in 5-10 years and just go buy another one. So Dollar Tree definitely works as well. Mark, talking a little bit more back to the traumatic injuries, what are some good items for people to have to deal with traumatic injuries? And again, I know we talked about it before, it kind of based it on what your skill level is and whatever you can do or want to do. But what is some good things to have in your first aid kit to really deal with those traumatic injuries?
Well, the number one thing to remember is that all bleeding eventually stops.
Yeah.
Right? The challenge is we want to stop it before the supply runs out. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to focus on bleeding control measures. Bleeding control really takes priority over everything else. So we need to have materials and supplies with us to be able to stop bleeding. Yes, I do know how to make very effective improvised tourniquets, but I will tell you this, improvised tourniquets take time. Just as soon as you get it on there, you have to find the right stick or the right windlass or whatever, and everything that you find is too green or too dry and it breaks, and in the meantime, your patient's still losing blood. So if there's one particular item in my kit that I will never leave home without, it is a commercial tourniquet. Excuse me. And be very aware of where you source your tourniquets from. There was an incident, I don't know, gosh, this has probably been 10 years ago, And I want to say that it happened up in Maine. There was a paramedic. They had extricated a young woman out of a motor vehicle accident. She had a big, nasty leg wound with pretty open and free bleeding. And medic did the right thing. He grabbed the tourniquet and he put it on there. And as he was tightening it, the windlass broke. So he chucked that one out the back of the ambulance and he grabbed the next one. And as he was tightening the next one, the stitching that holds the sides of it together started to break. So at that point, he's out of tourniquets. So he actually had to improvise one, and that ended up saving the woman's life. But there was this really, really big investigation afterwards. And what they found was that the purchasing agent for the county had found this screaming deal online on tourniquet. And every single one of them was a Chinese knockoff fake. And so I'm not going to name the company, but they're headquartered out of Greenville, South Carolina, and their initials might be NAR. But they actually put out like a 22-page quality assurance memo and said, look, this is how you can tell if the product came from us or if it came from overseas. Count the number of welds, count the number of stitches. This is exactly how long the windlass should be. This is the material that it should be made of, etc. So, they actually make a fantastic product, but a lot of people will try to do a cheap knockoff, and I don't want a cheap knockoff if I'm going to count on a piece of equipment that's actually going to keep me alive, So, but yeah, I mean, when it comes to the traumatic stuff, okay, obviously, let's get all life-threatening bleeds stopped immediately because we only have a finite supply of blood. So let's focus on that. Then let's focus on the immobilization. Then let's focus on getting them insulated from the ground to prevent heat loss through conduction. And let's go ahead and start to treat them for shock. Because if you have a patient who is hypovolemic, hypothermic, and because they're hypovolemic, they're actually hypoxic, that's what's referred to as the trauma triad, and no one survives that. So we need to keep them warm. We need to get all of the leaks stopped, keep them warm, keep them comfortable. And, if you're in the wild, build a fire. There's nothing that says you can't do that. And I don't care if we're in the middle of a burn ban or not. I mean, to me, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. So,
yeah, great points there. Yeah, I think a tourniquet is definitely a good first starter on things when we're talking about trauma. You're really stopping that bleed. I mean, a tourniquet can as long as it's on a limb, can do that. And then from there, really building. If you feel comfortable with the tourniquet, you've taken some stop the bleed training. I highly recommend people go out and take the stop the bleed training. They actually have dummies that are parts of an arm or a leg. They're fake, of course. That actually where you can. They'll show you how to put on the tourniquet. It'll actually bleed a little bit, and they'll show you how to pack the wound, and stuff like that. A gauze and a tourniquet can go a long way. And a lot of people think tourniquet, that's for gunshot wounds or that's for
it's not.
Things like that. And no, they're not. I get that a lot. People are like, that's if you get shot. I'm like, no. You can use a tourniquet for so much more. If you're in a car wreck and you lose, part of your hand or your arm and you're, bleeding profusely, that's what's going to save you, or any other traumatic injury. So
another potential group to maybe hook up with is also your local community emergency response team or your local CERT team. I know down here in Spartanburg County, South Carolina, they have a very, very proactive team, and they are basically the backup for the first responders. Anytime that there's a big event that happens, you basically get free training, free exposure, free ride time, in exchange for giving up like 4 hours a month of service.
Yep.
So, that is really a budget conscious way to do it. You also get to network with a lot of people. You get to play with a lot of neat toys, and you end up increasing your knowledge level without having to go through anything that's, really strict and formal and expensive.
Yeah, CERT training, the community emergency response team training, definitely great. It's growing a lot. You see a lot more communities implementing it. Usually falls underneath your county, maybe even your city, depending on how big your city is.
Mhm. Yeah,
Emergency management's agency, and definitely it's
mhm.
a great free resource. Like Mark said, great way to get some training, great way to meet people. If you have the time, definitely it's a I always say it's a little bit, easier to do that than being a volunteer firefighter. If you're more into, community and maybe less and having to, less requires less time, but definitely does a lot more. So Mark, kind of wrapping up here, we've
Yeah,
had some great conversation on that, first aid and trauma and basic medical care. Talking a little bit about the wilderness side, what
mhm.
is that wilderness first aid course that your off-road or off-grid medic teaches? What really could someone get out of that course rather than taking just that basic first aid course or stop the
Right,
bleed course that we've
right.
talked about
So
before?
yeah. So earlier I mentioned the golden hour, and the golden hour is the first 60 minutes that occurs directly after the onset of an illness or after a traumatic injury. And statistics have shown that if we can get someone to definitive care within that golden hour, survivability chances increase significantly. The farther outside that golden hour we go, the mortality rate starts to skyrocket. So what we offer is we actually offer specialized training to give you the skills, the knowledge, the ability to actually sit on a patient for hours, possibly even days. And it's not just the medical side of it. You've got, I mean, yes, you have that medical training that's there, but you're also using survival skills, the ability to put up a shelter, the ability to find water and make it safe to be used, the ability to make the right type of fire for the environment, navigation skills, knots, general bushcraft skills, basic camping skills, a little bit of medicinal plants. I mean, that is our original pharmacy. Is It's out in our front yard, right? We unlearned this over the years. But one of the biggest things that we teach is the ability to improvise. If you can figure out, like, every time I walk into a room, the first thing that I'm doing is I'm just, during my initial scan of the room, my lizard brain is over here going, okay, that's possible splitting materials. I can use this for that. I can use this for that. I can use this for that. So I'm actually gathering materials off of the landscape, whether it's urban or whether it's in the wilderness, to be used in a medical situation should I need them.
That's great. Yeah, that's definitely a skill that's lost, but it's still something that people can go and get that training on, and really getting that
Mhm.
situational awareness of basic first aid and just how to survive in general, which is something that we really try to push here on the All Hazards Prepper Show. We're
Yes.
trying to go past that and really making sure people understand
Yeah.
during disasters. It's
Yeah.
really
The number one rule of survival is don't die. It's pretty straightforward.
Yep, exactly. Yes, great conversation here, Mark. Kind of wrapping up. Last thing, where can people come and go and find you? Where
Yeah.
can they go get the training?
Yeah.
Where are you guys out there at?
So our website is Off Grid Medic, and that's all one word, but it's offgridmedic.com. You can also you can follow us on Instagram, you can follow us on Facebook, and gosh, I think we finally, after all these years, I think we finally launched our YouTube channel maybe a month ago, and we are continuing to add more content there as well. But anyone that has any specific questions, you can obviously DM us for that. And I say us because it's not only myself, but I also have another instructor out of Montana and a bilingual instructor out of Mesquite, Texas. But you can do that, or if email is your preferred method of communication, feel free to reach out to us. The email address is info@offgridmedic.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for being here on the All Hazards Prepper Show. I hope
Again, Blake,
someone,
thank
yes,
thank thank you for the opportunity, sir.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for being on, and I hope someone, if you're out there listening, just got a little bit of, a tad bit of information that you can go and really, improve your preps from, really build on that first aid. I really, something that's something when I first started this was I said that we really need to make sure that you as a prepper have a good first aid knowledge and have those good first aid resources, because it's really a big part of prepping. So I hope everyone continues to stay aware, stay prepared to stay alive out there, and check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, and we were also, on your favorite platform for viewing these podcasts. Definitely enjoy having everyone on, and everyone just have a great day. And the All Hazards Prepper out. Are you tired of your water tasting nasty? Do you wonder, is your water really that clean coming from your city or local municipality? I mean, look at all the water outages and boil water advisories that have occurred over the last few years, and maybe in your community it's occurred so recently. That's why I partner with Water Drop. When we first moved into our place, we realized our water was nasty, and we were tired of fighting with the refrigerator, gallon drum, jug, water filters. So that's why I have partnered with a company called Water Drop. Water Drop sells several under the sink filters that are easy to install, just with it was a 10-minute installation. Also, they sell whole house systems, reverse osmosis, even sell little filters that go on your ice maker, your camper, or even an outdoor faucet. So go check them out on the website listed in the podcast link below. Use the code the All Hazards Prepper, again, the All Hazards Prepper, for a 10% discount on any product you order directly from their site using that link. Again, make sure to go check out Water Drop if you want clean water for your home and your family and those that you love.